All right, and we are started. And I am back. My name is Micah Malone, reading some of my old history papers from junior year of high school, and I've got another one here for us today. And just a bit of a heads up, this one is a little bit of a heavier topic than the other essays I've revisited up until this point. This one does cover. It's not a very big essay, but it does touch on some of the torture that POWs experienced during World War II from their own words, essentially. So it's going to be a pretty authentic description of what they went through. So do with that information what you will. You probably should just listen to this video anyways if you're already watching it, because this is stuff that really happened, and it really did happen to real people, and they did experience it. And since this is like quoted segments, that means that these people, they were able to persevere and survive through like unthinkable torments and like unthinkable times, really. But I guess if you're already here, you could do them a favor by honoring the fact that they went through it by, hearing what they actually went through. With that said, let me start reading here. All right, this one does not have it doesn't have a title name or anything, so I'll just get started reading here. All right. We were put aboard a ship, the Totori Maru. About 2,000 Americans were crammed into the lower deck. There was not enough room for all to lie down at once, so some sat, some lay flat, and others stood up. We traded places doing this for 40 days. A few men at a time were allowed to go topside once a day for 10 minutes to go to the toilet, and get one canteen of water, which didn't go far. Our food for the first 2 weeks consisted of a cup of fish soup and crackers contaminated with soap. This gave all of us diarrhea. Soon, we were all sitting in excrement. Several dozen men died and were buried at sea. Sergeant Richard Henry Peterson. From 1941 to 1945, the United States of America sent soldiers, sailors, and pilots to battle the Japanese Empire in the Pacific Theater during the global conflict of World War II. This theater consisted of regions and countries across Eastern Asia and the Pacific, such as Thailand, the Philippines, and Australia. Over the course of 4 years, Americans fought Japanese forces tenaciously to defend their base in Pearl Harbor, heroically to overcome the enemy fleet in the Battle of Midway, and valiantly to oust entrenched soldiers in the Battle of Iwo Jima. By the end of 1945, around 110,000 Americans had been killed in the Pacific Theater, and 27,000 had been captured at some point by the enemy. These 27,000 men served as prisoners of war in Japanese-occupied territory until they were released, managed to escape, or were killed. This is their story. In 1829, a conference of several nations was held in Geneva, Switzerland, that among many other points, outlined the ways that prisoners of war, POWs, were to be treated. One source states that among other statutes, the Geneva Convention required humane treatment for all persons in enemy hands, without discrimination. It specifically prohibits murder, mutilation, torture, and the taking of hostages, unfair trial, and cruel and humiliating and degrading treatment. Members of the Japanese government verbally submitted to the terms mentioned, but they did not sign the agreement, leaving their alignment with the Geneva Convention abstract and pliable. When Japan entered World War II in 1941, the nation failed to uphold the conditions of the 1829 agreement, leading to numerous atrocities being committed against soldiers and civilians, not only from the U.S., but also from Britain, the Netherlands, New Zealand, the Philippines, Australia, India, and Canada. At the beginning of the war, American soldiers found themselves trapped defending U.S. interests in the Philippines, particularly on the Bataan Peninsula on the island of Corregidor, as Japanese forces encircled around them like a coiling snake. As the troops struggled to stay alive for days, it became clear to them that they would not leave the island as victors. On April 9th, 1942, the Americans surrendered to Japanese forces, and the cruel Bataan Death March began. One source notes that some 11,000 Americans on the Bataan Peninsula were marched inland on hot jungle roads with no food or water. They continued proclaiming that the source continues proclaiming that Japanese soldiers bayoneted American soldiers who fell by the wayside or tied them up in barbed wire to be eaten by ants. Their brutal treatment continued. If the men tried to escape, there were, according to one POW, Staff Sergeant Henry Willato, 10-man squads, and if you escaped, the other 9 would be killed. There were 2 or 3 of those situations that happened, and 9 men got their heads chopped off. Another former POW, Sergeant Richard Henry Peterson, remembered one of his experiences thus. 4 of our group escaped. I, along with 3 other men, was taken to the Japanese commander. He alternated between questioning and beating us with a belt and a bamboo stick, from 8 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon. The 4 of us denied knowing anything about the escape. Actually, we knew everything. We were finally taken back to our compound, and the guards took our 4 top officers to the commander. We saw a Jap firing squad take them out of sight and heard the shots as they were executed. The acts of the Japanese government throughout the war did not go unpunished, and at the end of the war, several high-ranking officials were executed for their war crimes, such as committing biological experiments against captured soldiers and civilians, like the leaders of the immoral Unit 731, which specialized in this practice, and many other evils. Although this is a grim section of history, all history is important. We must remember the difficult stories of POWs during World War II. Their stories are just as important as those of General Eisenhower, who led the American forces to the Battle of Normandy, or Dick Best, whose sacrifices contributed to the U.S. victory at Midway, or the Tuskegee Airmen, who flew fighter planes behind German lines. POWs were part of World War II as well, and should be honored and respected as thus. And that is my paper. Definitely not as, I guess, flashy as a point of history. But yeah, like I wrote like multiple years ago in the paper, it's still history. It still needs to be remembered. We can still learn from it. We definitely should honor the people that were involved in these scenarios, even if they're not alive at the present moment. But yeah, thanks for listening. I guess if you know anybody, I guess that was a World War II POW. I don't know if any of you all do that watch this video, but if you do, definitely just be there for them in any way you can, because like this stuff was tragic and it did happen. So I guess, yeah, just be there for people. Yeah. But thanks for listening to this video.